The Crypt interviews in association with Mayo Leisure Point Castle Bar.
You're listening to The Crypt, and my very special guest on the show today is Nicholas Vince, who played the Chattering Cenobite in Hellraiser 1 and 2 and Kinski in Nightbreed. So you're very welcome to the show, Nicholas.
Thank you very much indeed, Rita. Lovely to talk to you.
Well, the first thing I want to ask you is, how did you first come to work with Clive Barker?
I was at drama school with Simon Bamford, who went on to play Butterball in Hellraiser. And after drama school, Simon worked with Clive in the dog company. And then I think it must have been Simon who invited me to a party up in Crouch End near where the drama school was. And this is about a year or so after we graduated. And I just met this charming young man who said, "Would you like to come and model for me?" And I did. And we became firm friends. And the modelling Clive used to take photographs of me, and I ended up on the covers of the books of blood that he illustrated. And so I've got a lovely portrait of me with, my head, with my skull all peeled back and my brains exposed, and
As you do.
the needles dropping into my brain. Yeah, it's lovely. It's typical Clive.
And then how did the part come about on Hellraiser?
Clive, basically when Clive was putting it together, he'd written the novella, and basically he got his mates in to play the monsters, because there was Doug and Simon from the dog company, and Grace Kirby was his cousin, and as I say, I'd been modelling for him for a couple of years by that stage, and then he just kind of invited all his mates in to play monsters.
And what description was given to you as to what a Cenobite was?
Oh, that's very interesting. I think the first thing, I had the script, but the first thing that I clearly remember is that we were shown a kind of a promotional pack thing with the original tagline, which was, "There are no limits." And I think that's kind of what the thing is. And also, obviously, there's a sadomasochistic element to it, but also when they were talking about the costumes for Doug and Grace and Simon, there was a very priest-like thing going on. So kind of hell's priests, if you like.
Yeah. And what was the whole makeup process like for becoming the Chattering Cenobite? Could you breathe inside of that?
I could breathe. The sound that, and this was Ashley Lawrence who played Kirsty, who reminded me of this. She said the sound that she most remembers coming from me during that wasn't the chattering, but because the teeth that you see are plastic teeth that are recreations of my teeth. They sat outside my mouth and they were sitting on top of my teeth like dentures. So he had to have denture grip to hold them in, and that made everybody salivate. Simon was in a similar situation. So he used to salivate, so we were just constantly trying to swallow the saliva we were creating.
Oh my God, that must have been so difficult.
It was not pleasant. And I literally, Simon was the same, when neither of us could really hear, speak or see whilst we were doing this. And, we could be left, I think the longest I was left in the makeup was 8 hours. I think they did take the teeth out, so I could probably speak a bit, but I couldn't hear and I couldn't see. So it was very strange, and tough process.
And was the face, was that all one piece?
Yes, it was. It was it was kind of like a balaclava, if you think about it, because there was a slit down the back of it, and then just a hole for the mouth. That went on over the teeth, which were already put in position. And then what they did was they cut up condoms and used super glue to glue the teeth to the mask to make sure that when I chatted my teeth, they didn't move in relation to each other. The lips moved as if they were part of my face. I saw a very freaky video somebody put up on Facebook a couple of days ago, actually, where they've just zoomed in on the chattering teeth, and you can So what looks like gums are basically cut up condoms held together with super glue.
That's gas.
Oh, and then KY jelly to make the to make the saliva for Chatterer. I always remember we had a 16-year-old runner who's gone on to do lots of big, cool makeups. And he and his name entirely escapes him for the moment. That's terrible. But he's a 16-year-old. I was chatting about this to him on Facebook the other day, and he was saying he really got to know the local chemists because he was constantly having to go in to buy condoms and KY jelly.
They'd be thinking he was a busy lad.
He was busy, yes. I think he was bright red at the start of this process, but he kind of got used to the idea at the end of it.
Well, I think the special effects in the movie, they've aged particularly well, and especially the scene with Frank's resurrection in part 1. Is there any particular scene that stands out in your mind, special effects-wise?
I think, funnily enough, you should mention that one. I liked that one particularly because I went to watch the filming of it, because it was done afterwards. It wasn't part of the original script. The American producers, New Line Cinema, as New World Pictures, put money in after they'd seen the footage that Clive had produced to begin with. And I remember because I really didn't see much of what was going on when we were filming, so I kind of wanted to know how filmmaking was done. So I went to watch that being done, and it's all puppetry and reverse camera shot, reversing the film, etc. So I remember that bit particularly.
I think it's so much better watching things like that when it's the special effects rather than CGI.
I think, yes, there's a huge controversy. I think most people would agree with you. I was talking to Jeff Portis, who designed the Pinhead makeup, about this. We're having a conversation about this. And he was saying that basically he doesn't mind CGI because there's definitely a place for it. But there is something very emotive about the... having an actor suffering under stuck on bits and bobs. I think as an actor, it really helps you. Having said this, I have nothing against CGI or performance capture. I have a great mate, Dawson, who does performance capture a lot, who works with Andy Serkis a lot. And I'm tremendously admiring what those guys do and what you can get through. I loved Avatar. I just thought that was brilliant. And King Kong, Andy, and you really understand. I don't see how you could have done that giant ape unless you've done it in the Ray Harryhausen way. And Harryhausen got amazing emotion into the original King Kong. But I think it has its place.
Yeah. And then working on working on such a low budget, I'd imagine everyone was under a lot of pressure to get the scenes right.
I don't know that it felt like that at the time. We were having too much fun. We were laughing. I got told off for laugh. I got a very loud laugh when I laugh. And it was very distinctive. And I do remember the sound man coming in and just telling me to shut up. Because it was a very small studio that we did Hellraiser 1 in. Hellraiser 2 was done at Pinewood, so I was safely away from the set. I couldn't do any harm. But there's a place called the Production Village up in Cricklewood, and it's no longer there now. It's been knocked down. But it was tiny. The whole studio is probably only about 4 or 5 times the size of the set of the torture room. It really wasn't big at all.
You're part of the new Hellraiser documentary, Leviathan, the story of Hellraiser 1 and 2. Can you talk a bit about that experience of making that documentary? It
was fun. Again, it was fun. I think they had so many questions. They asked us to prepare for, and I literally got pages and pages of questions. Quite a few of them, I have to say, sorry, I have no idea. I wasn't involved in that bit. But they really have done their best, absolutely, Gary Smart and his team, to really...
delve into it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, delve into it to really find out absolutely everything that's not being done before. and known before. And then what was really nice, so we filmed those separately, and then they asked Simon and I to come back together, Simon Bamford and I, because they said they'd seen us on stage, and they'd seen videos of us, and we bounce off each other so well. So that was really nice, actually. We got to do what Simon and I, and again, just lots of laughter and silliness and so on, was what we really enjoy doing.
And that's out this month, isn't it?
It is, I believe. Yeah. Or is it next month? I think there's a special showing for us, everyone who's involved in it, in May. But yes, I believe, yes, April, that sounds, I haven't got a date off the top of my head. There's just done a thing on, an article has just been published. I know, Metal Onslaught magazine will hopefully be able to tell you it's free and it's online and you can find the date there. Right? Or if you just go on Facebook and look for Leviathan, the documentary, you'll find it there. Just search on Facebook. I'm sure they've got it all there.
All
in fact,
there
probably be doing that.
Yeah, I'd Gary on before talking about it. And they're massive fans, so it's good to have it made by people who are so into the movie, because you're really going to get every angle studied, I'd say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what I mean, this came out of a Monday. Pre-orders go live on Monday, the 13th of April. There you are. Fantastic. And this came out of what was one of my favourite screenings. They brought myself, Simon, Ken Cranham, Jeff Portas, and Roy Puddifoot, who Jeff and Roy are partners, and they worked at Image Animation. In fact, Jeff was a partner in Image Animation. And as I say, Jeff designed Pinhead. And they had us all up for a double screening of Hellraiser 1 and 2 with question and answers. And that was a great evening, particularly as Simon and I discovered that we'd been saying things wrong for the last 2 or 3 decades in terms of the way the makeup process. And Simon was always used to say, well, they shoved straws up our nose so that we could breathe when they put the plaster of Paris on our face. No, they didn't. They never did anything of the sort. They said they might hurt us if they'd done that. They just used to wipe our nose. They just used to make sure they were clean using Q-tips or bits of cotton. So that was a great evening. So that was the same guys. You know, that was everybody who involved with that went on to do, or most of the guys involved with that went on to do the Leviathan documentary.
But as I was saying to Gary, it's great to see one coming out in Hellraiser, because you have that Never Sleep Again for the Nightmare on Elm Street, and then his name was Jason, and it's great. It's great to see one come out for Hellraiser now. Then moving on from Hellraiser, you played Kinski in Clive Barker's Nightbreed. Now, that was harshly edited, and it was a different movie, I believe, to what Clive wanted. So could you explain what happened there?
Yes, I mean, basically, Clive was, it is Morgan Creek, and I can't remember the gentlemen's names, except, so basically they were partners, and the partner who had hired Clive and commissioned the movie left the company soon after filming started. And Jim Robinson was the guy who was there. Mm-hmm. And basically I just don't think Jim really kind of got it, and that's what was said at the time. I think Jim's spoken about this, and I don't want to gainsay anything that Jim has said. But basically, the budget was just going over budget, as far as I understand. You know, the film just got with more and more monsters. Mm-hmm. It became here. I mean, there were more monsters, I think, than any other movie at that particular time. Definitely. And they, basically, let's say the studio, the distributors, they wanted a stalk and slash movie. Whereas what Clive, and the original script, when I read it, was very much like the book Cabal. It's kind of like a European folk tale stroke fairy tale. Mm-hmm. It's got that dark romanticism about it. And I mean, Clive's described it as Gone with the Wind with monsters. I think it's a romantic story. It's the romantic story of Laurie and Boone, and what a woman would do for the man she loves, and what is a monster, and who really are the monsters. And and that was just kind of lost by the time he'd gone through the studio process. So yeah, it was mashed up. It was not what Clive wanted at all.
Doesn't it go to show the power of when it gets to there?
Yeah, I mean, and Clive has said over the years afterwards when he interviewed about this that basically it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of other people's money. And they need to know that they're going to get it back. Yeah. And hopefully they're going to make a profit so that the production company can stay in business and make other movies. So Clive's being completely respectful, of what it was. But I think it was hell for him. And if I know it was hell because he talked about it recently in Los Angeles, it was hell for him because he obviously had such a clear vision in his mind of what it was he was trying to do. And what was released was nowhere close to that.
Well, then last year they released the director's cut. Now, I haven't had a chance to see it myself. How different is it?
It's very different. It's done what I alluded to earlier. It's kind of brought to the fore the story of Laurie and Boone. Whereas the original movie is about Decker, who's a stalk and slash thing. Stalk and slash person. It is a romantic story, and it's a lot more to do with the breed themselves. Simon Bamford was talking about it, and he was saying that he does find it harrowing to watch. The bit at the end of the movie where the human beings destroy Midian is harrowing because it's a massacre.
Yeah,
it really is a slaughter of the innocents, and I think that is a bit harrowing to watch. I know exactly what Simon means by that. It's what Clive wanted originally, and I think that gave him a tremendous boost. Because I was at a screening in Los Angeles when they released it. I was lucky enough to go there, and it was a very emotional evening. I really do recommend anybody go out and get the director's cut, and that all came out, its pure existence came out of the Occupy Midian and the Cabal cut, which is a different thing, which is a very different thing, which is something to be put together by a guy called Russell Charrington, based on Clive's original script and an old VHS tape. But the director's cut uses the found footage, all the footage that was thought to be lost. So it's a very high quality product.
It was a long time coming for him, wasn't it? That was about 24 years.
Yes, absolutely, and that's quite extraordinary. And I don't think I had no idea. And when I saw the Cabal cut, which, as I say, was spliced together for an old VHS tape, and bits of which had the quality of 90s, 80s porn, you had kind of pristine bits from the DVD, and then you had this really dodgy VHS stuff going on in the Cabal cut, but people still loved it because I think it was there because the story was there. That was the important thing, was the story was there, and people really embraced the Cabal cut, and so the director's cut, and that just shows the power of the internet and people. If there is enough reason for people to do this, then the studios, for a very generic term, will take notice.
And what's it like working with Clive in terms of him taking ideas from cast and crew?
It's hilarious. I think I've said in the past, Clive will always listen very, very carefully and respectfully at any ideas you've got, and then we did it his way. And I think that's kind of unkind. I don't want people. Clive did take on people's ideas, and he really does, because filmmaking is such a collaborative process. But, in terms of working for Clive, everyone, as I say, we were a bunch of mates. It was kind of like a family who made 3 films together, because the crew, Robin Vigin, the sound guys, and Robin draws a lot of the people who worked on the earlier Hellraiser movies went into Nightbreed. So after and when, definitely on Hellbound, it was the same, more or less the same crew. As a lot of the people from Image Animation who did all the makeup effects did one or more of the movies. And what's amazing is I've been getting in touch with people recently about prosthetic effects. I'm amazed by the number of people I knew 25, nearly 30 years ago now on Hellraiser who've gone on to win Oscars, for example. These young men who are just out of their teens or in their early 20s. And I think that's part of what working with Clive is about, that he just inspires people to do their best, to give everything, to get involved with stuff and to do what they love.
And then in Nightbreed, how did the makeup compare?
The difference between having to get up when to be honest, I got up horribly early on Hellraiser anyway, but basically to do the Nightbreed makeup, that took 5 hours to get into Kinski. Chatterer was only an hour, and however much I moan about not being able to hear, speak or see, at least I could wander around most of the time without any makeup on. Compared to the other guys, particularly Oliver Smith, who did Frank in the first movie.
Yeah.
So, Kinski was 5 hours, done by Neil Gorton, who went on to do all the makeup for Doctor Who, the TV series, the recent Doctor Who, with Millennium effects. I thought that was funnily enough, it's not the original makeup that we thought it was going to be, because in the book Cabal, Kinski is actually a character called Jackie, who's described as having two faces melded together, but two different, the ultimate Siamese twin, that it's not just a body, it is a face that's melded. But the makeup just didn't work in terms of reading on camera. It just was going to be obvious that only one of my eyes was actually going to be visible, and the other one would be a false eye. So Clive changed it it got changed later on down the line.
Wouldn't you love just to climb into his head for a day? My God, you can imagine what goes on in there.
Well, one of the lines we came up with for Clive during the making of Hellraiser is, "Clive, you're a sick puppy." With all the affection in the world. I mean, the great thing talking to Clive is always one of the most enjoyable experiences that I've ever had in my life. Clive's a huge influence on me, and part of that reason is because he's incredibly intelligent. He's curious. There are no limits as far as he's concerned. He just questions everything. He's interested in it. He's hugely read, but also he's loving, generous, and kind as a person.
Yeah.
I've sat with Clive when he was doing signings for 7 hours straight, and most of the people who brought books to his table would have got a little drawing, a completely original work of art in their book, as much as he possibly could. Clive loves people. Clive is fascinated by humanity, I think.
And it means so much to fans when, you meet someone you've idolised for years and then they treat you like that. And it's something I've always tried to emulate. The rest of my Cenobite pals do as well. And I was reading a description of somebody meeting the Soska sisters, who they're great pals of mine as well. And absolutely... Clive doesn't use the word fan, funnily enough. He says enthusiast. He's always said, the fan is a slightly dismissive, there's a slightly dismissive connotation. I'm so lucky that people want to come and travel literally halfway around the world, from Australia to conventions on the other side of the planet, to come and meet us. And how could you not want to be just fascinated by them and want to know about their lives, and that something that's standing around in a whole load of rubber and leather nearly 30 years ago now. Because you said that you were mentioning earlier on before we started this chat that Hellraiser had an effect on you. Yeah, big time. When the walls would open and you'd come out.
It's interesting, and I think particularly for not just for women at all, but I think particularly Chatterer for women seems to have found effects on women.
And then, of course, Barbie, her eyes, the way she'd look. Ooh.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Both Grex and Barbie gave very really creepy performance in those two movies. And there's something doll-like to Barbie's praise, where Grace is more sunken, but both of them are just very, very chilling in those movies.
And we're on about Hellraiser again, actually. What do you think of all the later installments?
I have to say, I've watched number 3. I've watched bits and bobs of the others. Can't even remember the names. I'm very pleased that Chatterer keeps on re-emerging in different forms. He's been a chattering torso. He's been a dog, which reminds me of my favourite question that I was ever asked at a convention. I discovered that I've got quite a few 9-year-old boys are very fond of Chatterer, apparently. And one of them asked at one of the conventions if the chattering dog, I think from Bloodline, was Chatterer's dog in hell. Which I thought was just a wonderful concept. Just a brilliant concept. So listen, I think a lot of them, as everyone well knows, who's listening may well know, is that a lot of those scripts were not written as Hellraiser scripts. Somebody said, I know, to get this made, let's drop Pinhead it.
Being so popular.
Yeah, which makes economic sense, but not artistic sense. And I always, there's nothing as good as, I think, to be honest, we're really lucky that we got the first 2 movies that we got. There are a couple, there are other series. Halloween's done some really, really good, had some really good sequels. But, Hellraisers are sadly less so.
The first ones are the main ones, 1, 2 and 3. And after that, it's a bit of a blank in my brain, so they mustn't have had that much of an effect on me. I don't think they do, sadly. Now, Nicholas, you're also a writer. So can you tell us about your book, What Monsters Do?
Yes, and I can tell you about the other one as well, Other People's Darkness.
That is the next question. So you can throw it all into one. Throw it all into one.
All into one. Basically, what happened was I left acting years ago, decades ago now, and decided to eat and have pay the rent, etc. And then ended up by working in computers. And then in 2012, I was made redundant, and I thought, okay, well, now I've got a bit of money behind me. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And that was sit down and write. And I wrote 7 short stories for the first collection of What Monsters Do. And then I wrote another 5 for Other People's Darkness. And the interesting thing is the stories are getting longer, the short stories. So the What Monsters Do, it takes 2 hours to read. I've been reliably informed. And then the second one takes slightly longer, because although there are only 5 stories in it, they're actually longer than the ones in the first one. But I've always been fascinated by horror. And before I met Clive, I was reading the Pan Book of Horror and things like that. Yeah. So I like the short story as an art form. My favourite writer, Books of Blood. Brilliant! Clive, you're just a genius. My stuff is not as good as Clive's. I wish. There's some people have been very generous in saying, I noticed a review the other day and I thought, oh, really? Oh, thank you. But it's... as I said, Clive's a huge, great influence on me. And there is one moment in the first book, What Monsters Do, where, and this is on one of the Amazon reviews, the lady said, I screamed so loudly my flatmates fell off the sofa.
Oh, God.
And I thought, really? I don't remember writing that bit. I don't remember. And then I met her at a convention, and she said, oh, yes, it's this. I thought, oh, that's... And then I was with Hugh Ross, who plays Narcisse in Nightbreed. Mm-hmm. And he was reading my book on the way back from Aberystwyth. We'd done a screening of the Cabal cut in Aberystwyth, and he was on the train. And he was sitting there in the train reading it. And suddenly he jumped in his seat and looked around and looked at me and thought, yeah, I know exactly what you've just read. So they're scary.
Are they very dark stories?
It's interesting. I think then, yeah, actually. I mean, the first one, I think they're over 16s only. People think, we're encouraging our children to read. Is it okay for them to read what monsters do? No, it really, really isn't. There's male rape in the first book, so I think no. I think what I try to do in my stories and my style of writing the stories is very much, and there are traditional monsters, particularly in the first book. It's trying to make it as real as possible, because for me, the everyday is the most terrifying thing. Yeah. And I just think, and what goes on in the world is far more terrifying and revolting and disgusting and heartrending than I tend to write. But at the same time, I think, it's the reason why we love horror, I guess, Rita. There is a catharsis in horror. There is nothing like a damn good scare. I know it's not popular with my mate Barbie, but I love Cabin in the Woods. It was the first horror movie I watched after I'd been made redundant, funnily enough. And I remember just glowing. I was terrified. Everyone laughs at me because they know, they see me, I scream really loudly if I get scared. In fact, I have absolute evidence of this. I went to see the stage show of The Woman in Black. Have you ever seen it?
Oh, I haven't seen the stage show. I've seen the movie.
See the stage show. It's quite extraordinary. I now have empirical evidence that I scream louder than a row of 16-year-olds. Because I swear to God, I really thought, I'm not sure if I'm not going to have a heart attack here. I don't know if I'm going to have flu. It is scary. But at the end, once you've gone through that process, you're relaxed and you've got all this adrenaline thrown through your system and so on. So I believe my first duty as a writer, as somebody who works in horror, is to entertain. Yeah. I entertain via scaring people. I'm not into what Clive referred to as just torture porn. Mm-hmm. I'm far more interested in the psychological stuff. So I think my stuff is far, I would like people to feel that the characters in my books could be living next door to them. And they could easily meet
that's
them.
it, exactly. Because it's like when you think back now when, like, you Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser and all that, these monsters, but then along comes Halloween and you have Michael Myers, and that goes to show that the guy next door could be the killer. It doesn't have to be the monster under your bed, and it's more scarier to think that there's someone walking down the street.
And a lot of the scare is is to do with the girls walking down the street and this strange guy in a car stalking them. Some of the, it's helped by his Carpenter's music as well. And obviously the whole setup, exactly who it is and what he's likely, and what he has already done, because that's explained in the first couple of minutes of the movie. And it's that thing of building of tension, and I think, of course, that's what Halloween really, really did. Is it brought horror out of the Gothic crumbling castle, and the suave and sophisticated Dracula into the guy next door. Just stunning. I love the Halloween. Absolutely, I love Halloween.
They're great. Did you like the remake, actually?
I haven't watched it, to be honest. Funny enough, it's... whilst I think about it, I think you're going to ask me about this later anyway. Original versus remakes are something I'm really interested in. I haven't seen that one. But I've done a couple of my shows on the YouTube channel about originals versus remake. We just did an interesting show on The Fly and Fright Night. And I think this whole controversy about remakes, you've seen it, I guess.
Fright Night. Oh, the Halloween remake, yeah. I really enjoyed it. Now, an awful lot of fans didn't like it, but I liked the whole fact... Rob Zombie brought a bit of backstory to Michael Myers.
Oh, interesting.
Why he was the way he was, like, do you know what I mean? And I enjoyed it now.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because I think one of the reasons I think there are two reasons why people don't, perhaps there are two reasons why people don't like remakes. Funnily enough, I think it's very much to do with the reason why some people are disappointed in the covers of songs. Mm-hmm. If you love a song when you first hear it and it's done by the original artist, then it becomes part of your life. It becomes part of your story. Particularly with songs that are shared, a song, you'll hum it in your head and again and again and again. And the same with horror movies. Perhaps, I mean, there are deeply other inspiring movies, but I think there is something incredibly visceral about horror movies, obviously. Mm-hmm. And they do strike deep into our psyches, and they have profound effects on people. And that is something very precious. It may not be pleasant, but I think it's very precious to people. And when they hear of a remake or they see a remake, somehow it kind of diminishes their original experience. Now, actually, that's kind of nonsense, because all you have to do is not watch the remake. Mm-hmm. But people get very emotional. I mean, they get very emotional about remakes. And I do find that fascinating. I like the idea of rebooting. Clive's talked about rebooting Hellraiser, and I can't wait to see it. I want to know what he wants to do with it now, 30 years later with all the effects at his command now.
Sure, God, he can go wild with it now, because it wouldn't even be, they wouldn't be as harsh as well at, making him cut this, that and the other out of it.
You say that. I don't know. I think in some way, somebody was pointing out to me, in some respects, things are more prudish now because they're aiming at a younger audience. So if you look at the Fright Night remake, that is a lot less sexually explicit than the original. That
was nowhere near as good.
No, it's a terrible movie. Yeah. I think a waste of great talent. But that just makes me angry. Really good actors put into such a horrible situation. Because you've got some talented actors there, and sadly not a very good script. But some remakes people really like. The other one that we looked at was The Fly. Now that, to me, is more, I use the term reboot, because what they did was they went back to the original material rather than the original film. Now, the original film with Vincent Price of The Fly, that is a very faithful rendition of a short story which appeared in Playboy, I'm pretty certain it's Playboy magazine, was immediately snapped up and then hurried into production. There are literally lines in the book that appear in the movie, lines of dialogue in the movie that are taken straight from the original short story. It's very faithful to the original. The reboot with Cronenberg takes a completely different slant on it and really delves into the idea of body horror and and is a completely different beast. And therefore the two will stand quite happily. And you can enjoy either or one or both. Mm-hmm. Not, seeing the other. It's,
You mentioned your YouTube channel there. So tell us about Chattering.
Chattering, well, I think what I realised, I I love talking to people, which is probably why this talk has probably gone on far longer than we probably intended.
I'm the same, don't worry. I just keep talking while we're having fun.
I really do. I love them. I'm getting better at managing my cues, my lines at conventions when I appear to them, because I'd often talk to people for 20 minutes and suddenly realize, oh, actually, no, that means somebody else has to stand in line for 20 minutes. It's just ridiculous. I love talking to people. Sorry, I really just love enjoying talking to people. And I realised that, and I'm also fascinated by new technologies. I've always been a geek. I love computers. The moment computers came out and personal computers came out, I was really fascinated. And as I say, I worked in computers for 16 years. And I realised there is this thing called a Google Hangout, where you can have one or more people on and just have a conversation. And I just thought, you know what, there's something here that I'd really just kind of like to explore and see what we can do. I like the fact, I tried blogging. I realized it takes me ages to write things. Yeah. My short stories a short story will take at least a month to write. And the shorter, the longer it probably takes, because you're cutting stuff out all the time. And people said, well, you should really be blogging. And I thought, it's just not me. But talking to people, I really enjoy talking to people because I'm the kind of writer who really doesn't like being on his own too much. That's why I bought a dog. Because I go a bit stir crazy here, particularly when you're dealing with horror. It's very easy to go stir crazy. I just thought, great, it's a way of me talking to some of the fabulous people that I know, and in terms of the Soska sisters who are coming on this coming Sunday, Sunday the 12th. Now, I know a couple of these broadcasts, that will be in time for people to know about this, but one in New York, I'm afraid it won't be. But you can see it on YouTube afterwards, and that was the other thing as well I found interesting, because the first... one of the early interviews that I did with the Soska sisters was a thing called Luggage in the Crypt. Yeah. Now, that was a series of interviews that I'd done for a magazine called Skeleton Crew back in the 1980s, where, again, I just realized I like talking to people. I meet all these amazing people like Neil Gaiman, Clive Barker, Joe Lansdale, Dave McKean. And I had the great honour of just saying, okay, well, what would you take into the afterlife if you're an Egyptian? You know, what books, films, music would you want to take into the afterlife with you? And I just thought, well, this is something new, and with all this new technology. Yeah. And what I like about it is that it's very interactive for people watching as well. So the people who tune in on the night, there's a possibility they can actually bring people on live to speak, to people on the other side of the world where they may not necessarily have that opportunity to go and meet people at conventions. And even if they can't come on live with us, then they can type in questions and get them answered live on air as well. And I just think that's fun. I just think that is just thoroughly good fun.
Particularly for us in Ireland, because we don't get an awful lot of horror movie stars and that coming over here. We've only started out. Dublin Comic Con, they're in their third year this year now. That's taken off really, really well. So hopefully they'll get a few horror stars over. But apart from that, it's mainly, the anime and manga conventions.
Oh, that's really interesting. No, I hadn't. I've certainly never been invited to Ireland. I'd love to come to Ireland. I'd love to come to Dublin. That sounds like a wonderful place. It's something I'd always been meaning to do.
It sells out. Dublin Comic Con sells out every year.
Wow. Yeah, no, well, if you're listening, Dublin, come, do get in touch. Let's see if we can make this happen, because I would love to come across. And apart from anything else, I love the Irish accent. So,
top of the morning, yeah.
I do. I love that. I'm married a Scotsman who's another Celt, and I love the Irish. I love the Irish. I love all accents.
I'm married to a Scotsman.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so our George should have a fine mix of an accent between the two of us.
I find myself dropping in little bits of Scottish slang every so often.
You pick it up. You
do, yeah. Via osmosis, you can't possibly.
Well, then, my final question before I let you go is, what other projects are you working on at the minute?
I'm on a very hush-hush project that I've been working on for months, which I keep on saying, it's hush-hush, I can't speak about it, but it's taking up the majority of my time at the moment. We hope to be able to announce that in the next month or so. I've been saying that for at least 6 months. But I think we're getting closer and closer to being able to do that. I am actually working on a third volume of short stories, really, really slowly. I can't remember the last time I actually picked up. I keep thinking, oh yeah, there's another idea for that short story. I need to go back to that. So I'm aiming to get that out this year as well. So there should be another collection of short stories. I would actually like to write plays again. I dramatized a couple of short stories for What Monsters Do for the London Horror Festival a couple of years ago. That was a wonderful experience. Yeah. Sitting in an audience, watching people react to actors saying your words, there is nothing quite like it, I have to say.
I'd say it's magic.
It's absolutely amazing. For any writer who's a writer, and I really do recommend that. Again, it's that thing of working with people.
Yeah.
As a writer, is a very solitary thing, and I'm not particularly suited to being a solitary person. So getting out and working with people and all these things is amazing. And of course, I'm acting as well. In fact, I've got There are 2 films, at least, all of which I should be filming fairly shortly. There's a film called The Haunted, which I think should be filming in the next month or so. That one's coming up. There's Borley Rectory.
I've seen that on IMDb. That's supposed to be one of the most haunted houses in Britain, wasn't it?
That's right, yes, Borley Rectory, yes. And this one's interesting because it's got Reese Shearsmith in it from League of Gentlemen. But it's an animation. And it's done with rotoscope. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a 20-minute drama, documentary, horror thing. Julian Sands is narrating, and I've got that filming should be just be a couple of days or a day or two, I think. That should be coming up fairly soon. So yeah, I'm still acting. That's the other thing I return to as well. I do love the phrase "jack of all trades and master of none" because it does describe me. Because I just think, ooh, there's a thing. I want to do that thing. No. There's a thing. Oh, it's bright and shiny. But I do find it's just the way I am. I'm completely eclectic. I love doing
all sorts.
Yeah, and I think, because I think all these things are really fascinating and interesting, and I love learning about things as well. I think learning a new skill is what keeps you young.
That's it,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Nicholas, you've been an absolutely fantastic guest, and thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Rita. It's been absolutely lovely chatting to you. This is a very pleasant way to spend a Tuesday afternoon.